Now, the expression that is most repeated in today's Bible passage, I would say, is the expression, in a little while. I counted, I hope it's right, I counted 7 times it was mentioned in today's passage. Now, we see Jesus opening up this passage with a statement. If you look at it in verse 16, it says this, Jesus went on to say, in a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me. Now, after the disciples hears it, how do they react to this statement? It seems like the disciples are a little confused. They're not sure what Jesus meant by in a little while. And we see this here in verse 17. At this, it says, some of his disciples said to one another, what does he mean by saying, in a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me, and because I am going to the Father? So again, they were confused. They're not sure what Jesus meant by his statement. And then, if you look at it in particular, they do not understand, again, the expression, in a little while, because if you continue in verse 18, they kept asking each other, what does he mean by a little while? And it says here, we don't understand what he was saying. So again, they're confused. They're not sure about the meaning of the little while that Jesus spoke here in today's passage. So what we're going to do today, we're going to explore the answer to that question. What did Jesus mean by in a little while? This expression tells us 2 things. One is, in a little while is indicating something that would happen in the future. So in a little while, something's going to change. In a little while, things are going to be different. So what is the change that Jesus refers to? It's what the disciples see will change. I want you to just come with me to place yourself in the shoes of the disciples. When Jesus is having this conversation with them, they are currently with Jesus. They've been together for the last 3 years. They've been speaking to each other. They've been talking to each other. They've been sleeping and they've been eating and drinking. They've been doing ministry together for the last 3 years. Now, at that point, they see Jesus. But then, again, in verse 16, it says, but in a little while, Jesus says, you will see me no more. Why? Because soon, Jesus will be captured. He'll be taken away. He'll carry the cross and die for our sins. That's why Jesus is telling the disciples, soon you will see me no more. But then it doesn't end there. There's another little while. But then after, it says, and then after a little while, again, you will see me, says Jesus. Why? Because Jesus, who died on the cross for our sins, he will be risen again from the dead. And he will be with the disciples, giving many convincing proof that Jesus has been resurrected. So it's changing what they see. In a little while, they're not going to see Jesus because Jesus is going to die. But in a little while, they'll see Jesus again because Jesus will be resurrected. But let me tell you this, not only is it referring to Jesus' death and his resurrection, because if you look at it in verse 17, let's take a look at it again. It says, at this, some of his disciples said to one another, what does he mean by saying, in a little while, you will see me no more, and then after a little while, you will see me, and then he says, and because I am going to the Father, which refers to Jesus being ascended to heaven to be with the Father. I think the same expression, in a little while, also appears in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 37, which goes, in just a little while, he who is coming will not delay. What does that mean? Jesus is coming back, his second coming. So let me put this all together for you, okay? Again, think about yourself in the shoes of the disciples. Jesus is telling them, in a little while you will not see me anymore because Jesus is going to die. But in a little while again, they will see Jesus because Jesus will be resurrected. But yet, in a little while, maybe after 46, 47 days, Jesus will be ascended to heaven, so they're not going to see Jesus anymore. But in a little while, Jesus will return to be with them. Okay? So Jesus is using this expression, in a little while, to indicate that something is going to change. What they see is going to change. They're going to see Jesus. Now, the expression, in a little while, also implies that the disciples need to be patient and they have to wait. Let me just give you an example. I use this expression a lot, in a little while, especially on Mondays. Why? Because Mondays are my day off. So somebody asked me yesterday, what would you like to do? Would you like to go to the beach? Do you like the beach? It's like, no, I'm not a beach person. Oh, you like to climb mountains? You don't go hiking? I told them, I'm not a mountain person. Then who are you? And I said, I'm a couch person, okay? So in my living room, there's a nice couch. I just want to lay down there and not move and not do anything on Mondays. That's me. Now, that's my plan. Now, my son, Johanan, comes by. He sometimes says, Daddy, let's play Lego. You know, he's all excited because he wants to play with Daddy. And while I'm lying down in my couch, there's a battle that goes on in my head. One side of my mind, he goes, as a good father, you should play with him. Okay? But in the other side, in my mind, he goes, but you're tired. You deserve the rest. So there is a battle that goes on. So my solution to it, so that I don't compromise either way, I would just say, in a little while. Right? What I'm saying is, it's going to happen, but wait patiently, okay? But it's going to happen, but not right now, okay? So I get rid of Johanan, okay, for a few hours. Now I'm still laying on my couch on Monday. The second person who usually approaches me is my wife. And she goes, honey, can you vacuum the house? Let's clean the house together. And as I'm laying down, again, the battle occurs. The battle begins. This side says, as a good husband, you should clean the house. You should vacuum. But on the other side, it says, no, I'm tired. My body wouldn't move. So what do I say? I look at it, I go, in a little while, okay? I'll do it. I promise I'll do it, but not right now. It's going to happen. So wait patiently. I'm sure those of you who are studying, when you're playing games or you're searching on things on internet and you're watching TV, your parents come to you and say, go study now. Go do your homework. And you look at them and say, in a little while. What does that mean? Parents, mom, dad, be patient with me. Those people who are working, if you're a boss, your coworkers come to you and say, can you help me out with this project? And because if you're working on something, you'll say, you know what? In a little while, because I'm working on this. When I'm done with it, I'll jump into your project. Again, what little while means is that we're asking them to be patient. We'll definitely get it there soon, but not right now. So same thing happens here. If you look at in verse 20, this is what happens. It says, very truly I tell you, says Jesus, you'll weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. Let's take a look at another verse, verse 22. It says, so with you now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. What is Jesus saying? Right now, you will suffer. You will be filled with sadness and grief, and you'll even weep and mourn. But he says, in a little while, your grief will turn into joy. So, wait patiently. Hold on. There will be a change of emotions, how you feel, how they feel. Now, let's put it all together, right? We said on one side, there's change in what you see, whether you see Jesus or not, right? And then on the other side, there's change of emotion. Based on what you see, it's going to change how you feel. Now, in a little while, they're not going to see Jesus because Jesus is going to die. Their reaction, they're going to be sad, worried. They'll even cry and mourn. But in a little bit, they'll see Jesus resurrected, so they'll be filled with joy. But after a little bit, spending time with the disciple, Jesus will be ascended to heaven. At that moment, because they are no longer with Jesus, they will grieve again and they will mourn. But Jesus promises us that he will be back. When he comes back, he will be with the disciples forever and ever, and they'll be filled with joy. And thank Jesus, because to make things even easier for us to understand, I don't have to come up with an illustration because Jesus himself gave us an illustration, right? What is it? In verse 21, it says, a woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come, but when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. Now, pain of labor is probably the worst pain that a woman can experience. What? How do you know, right? Of course, I don't know. I'm a man, so I don't know from my experience, and I will never have that experience, thank God, right? But there's a survey that was given to those people who are pregnant and had babies. What was your worst pain? And the worst pain was that they experienced, again, I don't want to scare any of the pregnant women here. I know there's some of you here. But it was giving birth to a child. Now, we know how painful this must be because in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, this is what it said. God said to the woman, I'll make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. This is immediately after Eve sinned by eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, which God says, do not eat from it, right? It was forbidden, but Eve decides to eat from it anyways, and after she eats it, this is the punishment, right? The pain of childbearing. God probably wanted women to know and remember what happens when you sin. The price that you have to pay because of sin. Show her the pain that sin brought her to her life. And that was the pain of childbearing. So it must be really, really painful, right? Because your sin is heavy. To Adam, of course, we know he has to work for the rest of his life because God cursed the ground, and he has to painfully work all the days of his life, and that was his curse. And we get this. But again, for women, the worst pain you can experience is probably, again, the pain of labor. Now, I never experienced the pain of childbearing, but I have a second-hand experience when my wife had Vera, our second child. So when we had Johanan, that's our first child, because he wasn't growing properly, maybe 2 weeks before the baby was due, we made an appointment and the doctor brought him out to this word. So she didn't really have to experience the pain of childbearing. But now, with Vera, things are a little different. I remember that was the night we came back from a professionals retreat. It was a 2-day thing. It was a Friday night and Saturday all day. So this was my first retreat. The week I joined Grace Church, that was my first week. So I was so nervous, and I'm going there, all the scary people looking at me, and I wanted to preach, share my testimony. I was a little nervous. I couldn't sleep because I wanted to have fellowship with them. And after I did all of that, I came back home. It was Saturday night. I was exhausted, okay? So I took a quick shower. I went to my bed, and I just slept. And I'm a light sleeper. So my wife kept moving. So I'm a little bit, upset that she's waking me up and she's just moving around. So I look at her and I go, hey, what's wrong, honey? I'm half asleep, right? So I look at her and say, what's wrong? And she goes, I'm having this stomach pain. So I look at her and I say, go to the bathroom. And then she kept doing that. So I kept telling her, go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. And then I fell asleep. Before you judge me, because I know some of you are giving me that look, first of all, she had a stomach virus a few days before, so I thought that was what it was, and the baby wasn't due for another month. So I never expected that, okay? Now you look at me, it's like, okay, I got it, okay? All right, so it was about 4 or 5 in the morning. Now she wakes up, she wakes me up, and she goes, I'm in pain. And as I wake up, I realize she's in lots of pain. So I take her to the hospital. Now, we get to the hospital. Again, up to this point, I thought it was a stomach virus. But as we get to the hospital, the doctor comes to me and says, her cervix is 7 centimeters dilated. She has to deliver the baby now. So this is when I found out what was causing her pain, okay? And now, I was a little concerned. So I looked at the nurse and the doctor and I said, let me ask you a question. Do you know how long you take? And then they gave me that look. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I have to go to preach in a couple of hours. Well, my defense again, it was my second week at Grace Church, okay? I didn't know anybody to preach for me, right, last minute. So that's what I said. And then this nurse, I still remember the look that she gave me. She gave me that dirty look and she said, it will take as long as it takes. And she walked away. Okay. Again, now I want you to think about what my wife is probably going through. She's in a lot of pain, lots of pain. And then her husband is so clueless that her husband kept telling her to go to the bathroom, okay, throughout the night. Now, then her insensitive husband, whoever that is asking how long it would take to get the baby out, pretty much, right? Again, I'm sure she didn't say anything to me, but she's probably a little bit angry at me, okay? So I can notice the pain, that anger, that tiredness, the frustration in her face. But guess what? Everything changed. Everything changed when she delivered the baby. When the nurse took that baby and handed it over to her, her face changed and her face was filled with joy. Why? Because she has seen the face of her daughter after patiently waiting for 8 to 9 months. In this life, we have many troubles and trials. Honestly, if you ask me about this life, at least from my experience, there are more moments of pain and suffering than moments of joy and happiness, at least in my life. Especially living as a Christian in this world is not easy. It's painful. Things even becomes more complicated and more challenging if you want to follow Jesus the right way. But when that happens, this is what we need to tell ourselves. To say, in a little while. In a little while. Remember that as believers and followers of Jesus, in a little while, we see the face of Jesus, and at that moment, all of our pains and sufferings, all of our worries and fear will be gone, and we'll be filled with joy. There's something that I will always tell people, and I believe it, is that time flies. 1 year goes by so fast. Especially as a pastor, if you're following seasons and events, it goes by so fast. January, you have a New Year service, and we begin doing all this work and preparing for the New Year. And then around March, Lent begins, and you get busy. And then after Lent is over, summer season begins, missions and flow. We have all retreats. We prepare for them. And then when we come back from all the summer events and summer missions, then it's around September. We go to another retreat, and then at that point, you start preparing for the following year, and you have Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that's about it. A year goes by so fast. So I'm thinking, as I'm adding 1 year after another, 1 and 2 and 3 and on, in a little while, time will come when I'll be seeing Jesus' face. My grandmother, she passed about 10 years ago, and she once told me this: your age is the speed in which time goes by. So it means if you're in your 20s, then life goes as fast as 20 miles per hour. If you're in your 30s, then 30 miles per hour. I'm reaching my 40s, so if you're around 40, then that's the speed. My grandmother, she was in her 80s, so her speed of life was about 80 miles per hour. And in the end, she came to a point where she ended her race, and now she's with the Lord. Now, regardless of how fast and how slow you go, we all end up there in a little while. And when we see Jesus' face, all of our anxiety, all of our pains, sufferings, stress, worries, depression, your illnesses, they'll all be gone and disappear like they were never even there in the first place. And your faces will be changed, be filled with joy. And this joy that Jesus promises us is not a joy that comes and goes depending on your situations and depending on your mood. Because in verse 22, this is what he tells us towards the end. It says, no one will take away your joy. This joy cannot be taken away by anyone. This joy is permanent and eternal. And that is a promise of our Lord Jesus Christ. So when you face trial, remind yourself of the hope that in a little while, you will see Jesus, and all the things that you're facing, all the troubles that you're facing, and all the trials, they'll be gone one day. So you have to speak to yourself. You have to command this to your soul and to your life and to your mind. In a little bit, in a little while, I'm going to see Jesus. But you may ask, but what about now? Does it mean that, just until we see Jesus and we'll be filled with joy, until then, just keep suffering, keep grieving, live without joy? Is that what the Bible is teaching us? I don't think so. That's why we have to take a look at verses 23 and 24. It says, in that day, so it's the future, this is when Jesus returns, right? In that day, you will no longer ask me anything. Why? You don't have to ask Jesus anything because Jesus is with you. You don't have to pray to him, right? He's with you, so you don't have to do that. But before that time comes, what do you do in the present time? It says, very truly I tell you, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. It's saying, ask God, pray to him. And then in verse 24, it says, until now what? From the disciples' perspective, it's the past. The last 3 years they spent with Jesus, until now. It says, you have not asked for anything in my name. They didn't have to ask anything in Jesus' name. Why? Because Jesus is with them again. But what about now? What about now? It says here, ask and you will receive. Again, to pray, to come to God in your suffering. Because Jesus is not physically with the disciples at the moment, they're asked to pray to him. And because Jesus is not with us physically until Jesus returns, or we die, we end this race, and we come before Jesus, that's us. How we should react to that. It says to pray. We're supposed to pray to Jesus. But some of you may say, I try praying to God, but it doesn't make a change. But let me tell you, it says here, you have to pray with faith. Because here it says again that pray, and it says, my Father will give you. And then ask and you will receive. Believe that you will receive what you're asking. I have heard so many things when depression kicks in, when you're anxious, when you feel lonely. You try to cope your pain doing different things. Some of you do drugs, some of us we drink, or whatever it is. God is saying that's not the solution, but you have to ask Jesus. You have to come to God. You have to get on your knees and pray. And when you do it with your heart, when you offer a prayer of faith, this is what's going to happen. It says, again, in verse 24, ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. The joy that Jesus promises us is not just in heaven, but he wants us to see Jesus' face here on earth. So instead of coping your pain, doing many different things, you have to get on your knees and pray. Pray until you receive that peace. And he promises that ask and you will receive. So keep knocking, keep asking to God, and he'll give you. He will show you his face. Yes, it does not necessarily mean that all of your problems will be solved, all of your situations will get better. No, that's not what he's saying. But as you pray, God promises you one thing, that you will know that Jesus is with you in your sufferings. And by knowing that, it will give you joy. Look at the Bible. There's so many people and so many stories about Bible characters. What's the point? So that you may see yourself in their shoes, that you may become Paul and Moses and Abraham. That's the reason they're sharing their failures and their stories to you. Look at Paul. He's suffering, but he rejoices. Enemy says when things are bad in your life, your situations are poor, your parents are giving you a hard time, and your children are not listening to you, when you have relationship issues, when your career is not going as you planned, you have an exam coming up and you didn't do well, whatever the reason is, Satan says, the enemy says, you have all the reason to not rejoice. But we are Bible-believing Christians, so we fixate our eyes on the Bible. And he says it is more than possible that even during trials and your hard moments, you can still cling to God and be rejoicing. Right before I walked in here, as we were praying together in a small group, I asked, how many of you are suffering or going through some trials in your life? And almost half of them raised their hands. I'm sure the rest of them, they're probably raising their hands. They just didn't want to raise their hands. But then I asked the same question. How many of you are rejoicing now? But Didn't you just ask if I'm suffering? If I'm suffering, I'm not rejoicing. That's the lie of the enemy. We can be suffering. We can be going through trials, and we can even feel lonely and depressed. Still, we can be joyful because Jesus is with us. And what Jesus is asking us today is ask and you receive. Come to Jesus' presence. Don't just go through the routine. I prayed a little bit, nothing happened. No, pray until you receive. Pray until you receive that peace from Jesus. Jesus wants to meet with you today. He wants to meet with you throughout the week. And that's how our heart is so filled with joy, just like Paul, Moses, and Abraham, all the other Bible characters. It's an invitation. So again, church, as you face trials and challenges in life, be patient. Remember, speak to your life and say, in a little while, I'll see Jesus' face. And that's the moment when my grief will turn into joy. So look forward to that moment, church, because it's coming soon. As you're counting your years, that moment is coming soon. Number 2, also as you go through hardships and suffering, that little while moment, remember to ask Jesus, get on your knees and seek Jesus. Because no matter what you're going through, you can still rejoice. So remember that. And as we come to Him in prayer, sincerely, with that desperation, you will experience joy that, as He said, is complete, is satisfying, is fulfilling. That's what it means. And that's what Jesus wants to offer to us. So I pray, church, that you and I, as we face another week, another challenge, that we can still be joyful no matter what. That we may continue to rejoice in Jesus Christ because He is with us. And He'll always be with us. He will never forsake us. And as sons and daughters who will go to heaven one day, let's proclaim, in a little while. Let us pray.